Hi, friend. I hope you're doing well since we last spoke. Today, I'm covering a case that is relatively recent and needs some attention. We will be discussing the unresolved murder of 22-year-old Brittany Angelique Ramirez. But before we get into the case, I have some people that I need to thank. I want to thank Brittany's mom, Jessica, for speaking with me about her daughter and her fight for justice. I also need to thank my new patron and coffee supporters. Thank you so much, Charlene H., for being a donor on ko-fi.com/trueconsequences. And I'd also like to thank my newest patron subscribers. Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you, Inclidus. Thank you, Katie M. And thank you, finally, EMC. You all are helping to make this show possible by providing financial support at patreon.com/trueconsequences. That's it for now. Let's get into it. I am Eric Carter-Landin, and this is True Consequences. Before we get into what happened to Brittany, I want you to hear what her mom, Jessica, has to say as she describes her daughter.
Tell me about Brittany. Tell me about who she was and what you remember about her.
Brittany was a typical teenager. She was my tough teenager. She was the first one. I had 2 children. Brittany was my first. She was very spoiled. She knew that Mama and Daddy loved her, and she was loved. She had this beautiful dimple on her cheek, and just one. She was dark-complected like her dad, with beautiful hair, color. She was lively. She was into sports. She loved playing soccer. She was really good at it.
Now, I know that I get preachy about the fact that there are no throwaway people. I'm going to do it again, so skip ahead if you're sick of my soapboxes. Brittany had some struggles in her personal life. Who doesn't? This doesn't mean that she deserved what happened to her. I want you to listen to Jessica, Brittany's mom, as she discusses these struggles. And keep in mind that her struggles in no way meant that she deserved to die.
You know, when she got into high school, I know a lot of people don't understand and don't really know and hasn't hit their family, which I never hope it does. Mm-hmm. But she ended up with an eating disorder. Mm. So she was hospitalized a couple of times. Gosh, I didn't think she was going to survive that one. She really went downhill. That was hard for me and for all of us because it hits not just her, it hits the whole family.
Sure. It's
an emotional, mental abuse, of themselves.
Yeah.
And for the family, and it's just, it's a sad process for them to try to overcome. And she was hospitalized and unfortunately, as she got older, she continued on that path. She stepped away from it for just a little brief while, and she met a guy, and she ended up getting pregnant. And unfortunately, then again, she went back on her eating disorder, and instead of gaining weight in her pregnancy, she lost weight. So her baby had it was she was premature, and thank God we have her, and she was perfectly fine, thankfully. My baby was just full of energy, and she was thriving. She was trying so hard to be the strong person that she was inside. She's trying too hard. Her baby was the light of her life, like she was the light of my life. That girl gave it all. And she had her baby and she suffered from her eating disorder. And then she got hospitalized once again after she had her baby. Baby ended up staying with me while she went to Colorado, a specialty clinic out there. And they have to stay there for a couple of months for a while. So her baby got to stay with me. And so she ended up being close to me, which was good. And then her mom got out. We went to pick her up and she just fell into a drinking problem because when it comes to eating disorders, instead of eating their foods, they want to drink their calories. Mm-hmm. From that point, it's just a mental illness that ends up happening. And she's just, it was hard. It was hard. We didn't understand where she was, it's hard to understand mental illness.
Sure.
You don't. I sure didn't. I didn't even know about eating disorders until looking into it. So she's had a tough, situation, tough life. And we were always there trying to help her and guide her. And it was great. She had a good, system. Mm-hmm. Eventually she, started hanging out with these bad people and going out in the middle of the night, and coming back and forth. And I ended up trying to get custody of her baby there for a while because she was unstable.
Sure.
But she knew that she was in good hands, and Brittany always had a home. She always came. And when she was there, she was a great mom. She loved that little girl to death. That was her joy, was that little girl.
So now you know who Brittany was. You know about her struggles. Let's talk about what happened on the day that she was murdered. I'm going to read a bit from the police report that was filed on the day that Brittany died. I'm doing this to give you context into what happened. The reason I'm telling you all of this is so that if you know something, or if you know somebody who knows something, perhaps you could help with the investigation and help start the process of justice for the murderers of Brittany Angelique Ramirez. The following was written by officers on the scene when a young woman was dropped off at Presbyterian Hospital in downtown Albuquerque with a gunshot wound to the head. Quote, on September 21st, 2021, at approximately 0239 hours, I was dispatched to Presbyterian Hospital located at 1100 Central Avenue Southeast in reference to a shooting call. Comments on the call stated an unknown female was dropped off at the hospital with a gunshot wound to the head. When I arrived on scene, I overheard hospital staff speaking about the listed female. I overheard it being said that a red or maroon Kia pulled into the hospital and the listed female was pushed from the vehicle and left outside of the hospital. It was said that the vehicle's license plate was covered with a white sheet or shirt, and the vehicle left the area in an unknown direction. I was then advised when the female arrived, she was asked by hospital staff for her name, to which she may have replied Marie or Maria. I then followed Albuquerque ambulance number 17 to the University of New Mexico Hospital. The female was still not identified while I was at the hospital. I was informed the female was not in stable condition and was going to be operated on. Officer C. Ferguson arrived at the hospital and stayed there for updates on the condition of the female. This concludes my involvement on this date. Taser video was uploaded to evidence. The report will be forwarded to the Albuquerque Police Department Homicide Unit for further investigation. Another officer said, quote, on 9/21/21, at 0250 hours, I was dispatched to Presbyterian Hospital downtown in reference to a shooting. Upon arrival, I met Officer C. Wells, who stated that a female was just transported from there to the University of New Mexico Hospital with an apparent gunshot wound. I relocated to UNMH. Upon arrival, I made contact with Dr. Vsart, who stated an unidentified female was being treated for a gunshot wound to the back of the head. Upon arrival, I made contact with Dr. Vsart, who stated an unidentified female was being treated for a gunshot wound to the back of her head. Dr. Vsart stated that the projectile was still inside of the female's head and that the injury was non-survivable. The hospital would be moving the female to an intensive care unit to be placed on life support. I was able to take overall photographs of the female, but medical staff would not allow for me to move the female to observe the injury to the back of her head. I took custody of one bag of clothing items from Presbyterian ambulance staff. I contacted CSS Supervisor L. Higgins, who made a homicide call out. I transferred custody of one CD of photographs and one bag of clothing items to Detective A. Ortiz at the Albuquerque Police Department Crime Lab. While officers responded to the hospital in response to the call about an unknown female with gunshot wounds, crime scene teams were called 4 days later to an apartment complex in regards to a vehicle that needed processing. Here's a quote from one of those investigators. Quote, "I was dispatched to 543 Dallas Street Southeast in reference to a vehicle needing to be sealed pending a search warrant. Upon arrival, I spoke to Detective Simmons, who advised me that he had signed a search warrant for the residence to include the vehicle parked in the residential yard. I located the residence along the west side of the roadway at the listed address. The residential yard was located on the east side of the building, with the vehicle parked along the north side of the yard facing south. The vehicle had visible damage to the front and rear windshield and the rear passenger side window. The windows on the driver's side, rear, and front doors were missing, with small portions of broken glass located within the frame of the rear driver's side door. The damage to the front and rear windshields consisted of a circular defect to each glass pane. The majority of the windows were intact, with the rear windshield being shattered, but intact. The damage to the rear passenger side door consisted of several circular defects to the frame of the door and glass window pane. Photographs were taken of the vehicle and then the signed search warrant. Swabs were collected from each of the exterior door handles on the front and rear sides of the vehicle. After swabs were collected, I processed the vehicle for latent prints, with positive results located on the front driver's side door frame and front passenger door window. The vehicle was then sealed with yellow evidence seals and plastic over the damaged windows. The plastic was secured to the frame of the vehicle with silver tape. Additional photographs were taken of the vehicle after it had been sealed. After the vehicle was sealed, I was advised by Detective Simmons that an electronic surveillance system was to be collected from within the residence. I located the system within the living room along the north wall. The system was documented with photographs to include the serial number. After the tow truck operator began removing the vehicle from the property, I followed him to the crime lab, where the vehicle was placed within the secure storage lot. I did not have any further involvement on scene. The compact disc of photographs was verified to contain the images prior to being tagged into evidence with the latent print cards and swabs." End quote. Now I want you to hear from Jessica again as she discusses what happened to Brittany the day that she was murdered.
We got a phone call from our neighbor, which is my mother-in-law, and she said, "You guys need to come home right away. There's a detective here." And so we rushed home, and my husband knew something bad was happening. Like on the road, he was like, "I got a bad feeling." And I said, "No, a bad feeling of what? She probably got arrested or something, you know." And I was relaxed. I was fine. And him and her had this connection. Her and her daddy just, man, they had this connection. And so he felt that gut-wrenching feeling. And when we got home, sure enough, the detective said, "Please take the baby inside the home, our great-grandma's house, and I need to speak to both of you guys." And we sat down outside, and it was chilly, and he's like, "I got some bad news." My husband was standing up, and I sat down, and I said, "What is it?" And he said, "We found your daughter. She's been killed." And I said, "Are you serious?" He said, "Yeah. So we found her. She was pronounced dead. They dropped her off at Presbyterian Hospital, and they took her by ambulance to UNM, and she died on the way." Gosh, that just blew my mind. It just didn't sink in. I thought, there's no way. My daughter's a tough girl, man. She's not going to let anything happen to her. She's coming home to her daughter. She comes home all the time. I know she is. And I told him, well, gosh, whoever did this, which I doubt, it's my kid, they're going to pay for it. And my husband was distraught. He just ran off crying, and I just stood back and I thought, man, my husband, you know, and I just had to be strong. Like I had to keep my feet on the ground, and I'm like, I can't lose it for my family or for my kid and my granddaughter. My husband lost it, and we've been broken. The whole family, you know, it's just been, I still can't wrap my head around it that she's not coming back. And so a couple of days passed, and from what I heard, I spoke when we call family, they're like, well, we heard something on the television on the news saying that a John Doe is what they specified her as a John Doe because they didn't find any ID on her. And so they couldn't locate parents or any family members. From what I understood, and the police officer told me, she was dropped off. She was dropped off at the hospital by two suspects. Two suspects that dropped her off. The boyfriend, I believe, was my daughter's boyfriend. Mm-hmm. And he had taken off his t-shirt, and placed it on the license plate so it wasn't shown. Now, I've heard other things from other various people. Mm-hmm. I don't know how legitimately, that information is, if it's legit or not.
Or just rumor, yeah.
Or rumors. It can be possibly rumors. Mm-hmm. But I've heard that there was a third person in the back seat that was with my daughter, and they had blew some kind of meth in her face so she can revive somehow or be alert, and that she was alert when she was dropped off at the hospital. Like I say, those are rumors. I don't know. I have not been to the hospital to get any, paperwork or any of that stuff. He saw somebody coming out, or he saw an SUV driving by, stopping in front of the apartment complex where my daughter's car was at. And a female passenger, got out of the vehicle, went and knocked on an apartment, and she went in that apartment, stood there for a while, came back out with the keys to my daughter's vehicle, tried to start up the vehicle, and it wouldn't start.
In front of your husband?
In front of my husband. But my husband was on the other side of the street. So I guess they didn't see him because the detective said to, stay back. And my husband was ready to jump out, but he's like, I better just stay back.
Yeah.
And so this girl went back into the vehicle, the SUV, and drove off. My husband followed him. Instinct, this is my daughter's vehicle. How dare you come into this?
Why do you have the keys?
Right. How do you have the keys to my daughter's car? You guys have to have done something. Like, what happened? So my husband started following this vehicle, this SUV. And at that time, he calls the detective and lets him know what was happening. And the detective told him to stay back. Don't follow them anymore. Don't pursue them, because if any accidents occur, he is liable and he can be arrested. My husband which I'm sure can happen.
Sure.
So he agreed. He stopped following, but he was smart. He took a picture of the license plate, make and model, and gave the detective that information. Backed off, went back to where my daughter's car was, and stood there until the detective got there, and everyone else got there and took my daughter's car. And when I went to go pick up my daughter's car, there were 6 gunshots. Somehow, my daughter's car, yes, absolutely, I think she was shot in her car. Mm-hmm. Now, how in the world, where did this happen? And when did they take my daughter out of that car, place her to another vehicle? How long were they driving around with her? And finally decided to take her to a Presbyterian Hospital. And who are these people? And why didn't they mention this other person in the back seat?
Yeah, I mean, if these were quote unquote friends.
Right.
And if they were all in the vehicle together, and if they got shot at, okay, maybe they were worried if they were high or something, mm-hmm. that they would have gotten in trouble, whatever. But why wouldn't you now come forward, now that time has passed, if you were innocent, if you were just there, mm-hmm. right, and you saw what happened? Why would you not come forward with that information?
And one more other thing that is really disturbing, and it really bothers me, I found out from my niece, who saw my daughter, I think the night before mm-hmm. this occurred. And she heard because they all hung out with the same people, crowd of friends, mm-hmm. whatever. And she found out and told me, Auntie, Brittany's boyfriend just shot himself, or they shot him. Okay. This information I gave to the detective. The detective said, how did you know that? And I can't recall if I told him or if my husband told, I don't recall. Later on, it was confirmed her then boyfriend committed suicide. What did he commit suicide because he shot her, or did he commit suicide or did somebody kill him?
Right.
I have no clue. It's just like a mystery. And where are these other 2 females that were in the vehicle with them?
Right.
And where's this car, this red car? Because it was a red vehicle, 4-door vehicle.
That dropped her off.
That dropped her off at Presbyterian Hospital.
Finally, I want to read you a little bit from the investigative report that was written by one of the detectives who is investigating Brittany's murder. The specific conditions of the scene as described in the investigative report, the detective believed that the incident began at the southeast corner parking lot at the intersection of Central Avenue and 2nd Street in downtown Albuquerque. Surveillance video in the area was reviewed, and a large crowd was seen gathering at this location. Several of the people in the crowd were armed with handguns and fired gunshots. An autopsy for Brittany Ramirez was performed on September 22, 2021 by Dr. A. Kerr. Brittany sustained a gunshot wound that entered the right side of her head, and her manner of death is listed as homicide. On Friday, September 24, 2021, Detective Simmons was provided information concerning a firearm collected by Yakima Police Department. He advised the firearm was collected after the death of Brandon Yazzie. Brandon was found deceased at the Sky City Travel Center located at exit 102, Yakima Pueblo, New Mexico. Detective Simmons received information that the firearm could be related to the homicide of Brittany Ramirez. Detective Simmons made arrangements to collect the firearm from the Yakima Police Department and tagged it into APD evidence. On September 25, 2021, Detective Simmons was provided information concerning the whereabouts of the victim's vehicle. A 2007 blue Honda Civic registered to Brittany Ramirez was currently parked at 543 Dallas Street Northeast. At approximately 20:39 hours, CSS N-Drain was dispatched to 543 Dallas Street Southeast in reference to a search warrant for the collection of a blue Honda Civic. CSS drained, sealed, and towed a 2007 blue Honda Civic bearing New Mexico plates from the residence listed above. The blue Honda Civic was located within the driveway of 543 Dallas Street Northeast. The vehicle was parked facing south. The vehicle was photographed and the exterior was processed for evidence. Evidence seals were placed on the vehicle. The vehicle was sealed, towed, and followed to Metropolitan Forensic Science Center pending a search warrant. CSS Drain was instructed to collect surveillance system within the residence by Detective Simmons. On Tuesday, October 5th, 2021, at approximately 11:01 hours, a search warrant was executed on the 2007 Honda Civic. The vehicle was located within a secured parking lot at the Metropolitan Forensic Science Center. The doors were locked and plastic covers on the front and rear driver window and rear passenger side window. As several windows were not present and several bullet impacts were located within the rear passenger door window, all of the seals appeared to be intact. Exterior photographs were taken of the sealed vehicle. The seals were then broken, at which time the interior compartments were photographed. During the search of the vehicle, I located the following items therein: blood swabs that were collected from the interior passenger seat. Fake nails were located within the front passenger interior door handles. The style and color of the fake nails matched those collected by OMI on Brittany Ramirez during autopsy. Bullet impacts were located on the exterior of the vehicle. A bullet defect was located in the back window near the passenger side of the vehicle. The projectile penetrated the back window, shattered the glass. The glass remained intact because of the window tint. The projectile traveled from right to left, back to front. A search for the projectile was conducted and no projectile was collected. A bullet defect was located on the rear passenger side of the vehicle between the door frame and the rear passenger door. The impact was slightly above the rear quarter glass window. The projectile traveled from right to left, back to front. A projectile was located within the rear passenger door molding. A bullet defect was located above the rear passenger side of the vehicle. The impact was above the rear passenger side window. The projectile traveled from right to left, back to front. No projectile was collected. Items that were collected during the search of the blue Honda Civic: a blood swab collected from the front passenger seat, 2 fake nails in the passenger front door handle, a fragment collected from the dashboard, a projectile collected from the rear passenger door molding, 133 photographs of the Honda Civic, swabs from the interior, swabs collected from the front driver side door handle, a swab collected from the rear driver side door handle, a swab collected from the front passenger side door handle, as well as several latent prints. There isn't much more information available on this case as it is still an open investigation. As we close this episode, I want you to listen to Jessica one more time as she talks about what can be done to help her in her fight for justice.
My daughter, and unfortunately, is just, I miss her so much. I still have her right next to me. I still feel her. I'm still waiting for her to come home. And so is her daughter. Yep. And I know my niece said that she had some clothing for her daughter in her car.
What kind of car did your daughter drive?
She drove a 2006 Honda Accord.
And what color was it?
It was a gray color.
Gray.
It was gray. My daughter spray painted it blue.
Okay, so it would be recognizable.
Right.
So it looked like an unprofessional paint job.
Oh, absolutely.
Essentially, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Like it was tagged or something.
So if you saw a late 2000, right? 2000 what? 6
Mm-hmm.
Honda spray painted blue.
Oh, it was Honda Civic. Sorry. Honda Civic.
That was spray painted blue. Maybe had some gray peeking in around there.
And the bumper didn't belong to it.
So it had a mismatched bumper.
Right.
You saw maybe somebody get into a shootout somewhere in Albuquerque. You saw something. Don't keep that information to yourself. Any information could help detectives make an arrest. And that's really what's important here, is that Brittany's family gets justice for Brittany, because there's nothing worse than waiting for justice. There's nothing worse than not knowing the truth of what happened to your loved one. If you have information that could lead to the arrest of the suspect or suspects involved in the murder of Brittany, please call Crime Stoppers or go to p3tips.com. You can remain anonymous. You don't have to give any information other than what you know. Anything else you want to add?
You know what? I'd appreciate any information given out. I'd like to put my daughter, I'd like to be at peace for myself, for my family, and not going to bring her back, but at least I'd have what happened, where did it happen, how did it happen, bring some closure to our family. It's the not knowing is what kills us as well.
Yeah. That's almost worse.
It is. It is absolutely.
It's like insult to injury.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, I want to remind you that if you know anything related to the events that happened on the 21st of September, 2021, or if you have any information that could lead to the arrest of the individual or individuals involved in this brutal, senseless crime, please contact Crime Stoppers at 505-843-STOP or go to p3tips.com and you can remain anonymous. Remember the details. The car that they were in at the time of the shooting on September 21st, 2021 was a 2007 blue Honda Civic, and it is believed that the shooting occurred at 2nd and Central in downtown Albuquerque. If you were near that large group of people and you saw what happened, please call 505-843-STOP or go to p3tips.com. Thanks for listening, and stay safe, New Mexico.